Sutra, action, law, task asterisk. Set new tasks before achieving existing ones. A lack of motivation is often explained as laziness, but a long-term planning horizon extends life. What determines our joy upon receiving what we desire? Is it justified expectations, the timeliness of their fulfillment, or the achievement of a set goal? Certainly, all of this is pleasing, but it has little effect on the positive emotions resulting from achieving what we intended. It turns out, it's much more subtle. Let's take the professional sphere as an example. When we get what we expected, our emotion equals 0. We receive a salary, and usually, we don't feel particularly grateful for it. We earned it, so why jump for joy? Unfortunately, this eventually leads to burnout and a loss of motivation. Thus, there are different models of material motivation for employees. The first model, promise more than you can deliver. People are motivated and work well, but when they receive their salary, they will be extremely dissatisfied and are likely to leave, perhaps even suing the company. The second model, promise less but deliver more. Employees will be happy to receive a higher salary, but they will work poorly throughout. The third model, pay exactly what was promised. In this case, the workers lose their drive, and the job quickly becomes routine. There's no emotion. It turns out that the solution to this problem does not lie in the material realm. The best motivation model is to set a new task at the moment when the main creative part of the previous one is complete. As they receive their salary, the employee is already thinking about a new project and sees a new goal ahead. This model is not just a good way to motivate employees but also the best way to motivate yourself. We have all observed how often older people quickly fade when something in their life ends. A grandchild leaves for school, they retire, or a dog dies. A specific program ends, and there is no planning horizon or new goals. Life unconsciously shuts down the person because there is nothing left to strive for and nowhere to go. But the strategy of constantly aiming for new goals significantly prolongs life. It is no coincidence that the longest living people are representatives of creative professions and those who continue to engage in their favorite work even after reaching retirement age. Interestingly, statistics show that the longest life expectancy is observed among collectors, breeders, and conductors. A collector is always searching for new items for their collection. Breeders do not stop at what they have achieved and constantly work on developing more perfect forms of plants. As for conductors, according to a study by scientists at the St. Petersburg N.N. Petrov Research Institute of Oncology, the peculiarity of the conductor's work lies in the more intense intellectual and physical load than that of other musicians, which contributes to increased life expectancy. Sometimes, when we set a big and very important goal, we often blame bad luck for preventing us from achieving it, rather than a lack of motivation. According to psychologist Lewis Howes, luck, knowledge, and material resources are not the real reasons that hold us back from moving forward. The problem is that we don't always believe in the goals we set. Belief in this case works like a muscle that allows our will to conquer one height after another. The more we believe in ourselves, the more complex tasks we can solve. But what happens when that belief is insufficient? We take a couple of steps, encounter problems, fall behind schedule, which leads to guilt and disappointment. At this moment, we often see failure as a sign saying, "Postpone this task. Maybe the time hasn't come yet." And we promise ourselves to return to our plans next Monday, next month, or next year. The world is your notebook, on the pages of which you solve your problems. Richard Bach. It is only worth thinking about great things, Only big tasks should be set for oneself. Set them boldly, without being embarrassed by your own small strength. Alexander Alexandrovich Bloch. Such thinking can turn even the most motivated person into someone disappointed in everything, who fails again and again. So, what should we do? Both psychologists and businessmen recommend starting with setting small tasks that may not even relate to our global goals. Moreover, each new task should be formulated before the previous one is completed. This way, we don't lose momentum and constantly keep ourselves in a working state. These small and relatively easy to achieve tasks can train our belief in ourselves. Their solution will bring us joy and improve self-esteem, and we will have the strength for a new leap. Sherry Van Dijck, a psychotherapist, writes that setting new goals brings positive emotions to a person, as achieving even small goals brings joy, happiness, satisfaction, and pride. At some point, the process of solving them will begin to be associated with the pleasure of the result. This anticipation of conquering the next peak will become a source of inexhaustible energy and drive to move forward. To accomplish a specific task, we need an appropriate algorithm. But when setting a new task, our brain sometimes cannot quickly produce the necessary and ready-to-use action program, nor can it choose a strategy of behavior adequate to the situation. Therefore, it is sometimes very important to wait a while before starting a new task. In conditions of multitasking, it is worth setting new tasks long before completing and achieving the existing ones. This gives the brain's analytical systems time to process information, and the action algorithm will be more thoughtful. We must set ourselves tasks beyond our strength, first, because we never know our true strength, and second, because strength appears as we accomplish the unattainable task. Boris Pasternak. Two difficult tasks stand before a person: first, knowing when to start, and second, knowing when to stop. Paulo Coelho. Analyzing the tasks that are currently being worked on is one of the important but not obvious factors when setting new tasks. It can be compared to the law of inertial motion. Once we gain a certain speed, we will continue moving forward by inertia without expending energy. In other words, if we are working on one task and a new one appears, we can use the achievement of the first goal as a means to help realize the next task. The famous German philosopher and sociologist of the second half of the 20th century, Niklas Luhmann, argued that it is better not to wait for some problem to fall on our heads, but to set tasks ourselves that determine our behavioral strategy. Of course, it is impossible to fully anticipate the future, but it is possible to program it to a significant extent. Imagination, as one form of mental reflection, helps us predict the future. This mechanism of anticipating reality is called the action acceptor. Setting tasks for the future is an art that requires skillful risk calculation and the choice of the optimal strategy no less than striving for achievements and direct benefits. Strategic planning is especially important when it comes to saving lives. November 1943. Soviet troops, at great cost and with millions of human lives, are pushing the German Nazis towards the borders of the USSR. A large part of Soviet territory remains in Nazi hands. Japan threatens our country from the east. London is regularly bombed by the German Air Force. The residents of the British capital are forced to hide in basements and cellars. The United States has not yet been able to eliminate the consequences of the day of shame, the defeat of the American naval base at Pearl Harbor. Hitler still holds power over almost all of mainland Europe. Not only the economy of the Third Reich, but also the industry of France, Italy, Belgium, and other countries, works for the needs of the German war machine. Do the work of 7, but obey 1. A satisfied person solves the task at hand, but he does not turn the task into a problem. Max Lusher. At this difficult moment, the leaders of the three great powers gathered at the Tehran Conference. Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill discussed how to deal with a defeated Germany. Victory was still far from certain. The Second Front had not yet been opened. Hitler could still land on the British Isles and destroy the US Navy. But the leaders were deciding how to deal with a defeated Germany. And this program, outlined at the Tehran Conference, was later implemented. This happened largely because the leaders looked ahead and prepared themselves and their nations for victory. Setting tasks for the future and focusing on a global goal undoubtedly had enormous military strategic significance. And for the common soldiers, confidence in victory and thoughts of a future peaceful life were undoubtedly the main incentive not to give up and fight to the end. This effect is well described in the Karachay folk tale about how a soldier returned from war. There was a father with 3 sons. The eldest was already a wealthy merchant, the middle one owned 20 flocks of sheep, but the youngest, Bekbalat, was still a boy when the father suddenly died. The mother could not take her eyes off her little son and kept dreaming that when he grew up, he would live with her with a good and kind wife. Bekbalat dreamed of this too. Lost forever is only the one in whom aspirations have died. Ayn Rand. But then war broke out in the country, and the youngest son went off to fight. He didn't want to leave his home, his mother, or his friends. But he went to war with a light heart, for he had a great goal ahead of him. Besides, he knew how much girls loved heroes, so he decided to become a hero so that upon his return, he could choose the most beautiful and kind bride. He believed he would return alive and strong. Indeed, he fought so well that his fame spread throughout the towns and villages. But Bekbalat didn't fight just for fame. He wanted his army to win. With each new battle, he grew stronger and stronger. Then came the moment when he had to face the strongest warrior of the enemy army in a duel. The outcome of the battle depended on it. He carefully considered every move, practiced often with his sword, and rode on horseback. But all the while, he dreamed of how, after the victory, he would return home, how his mother would greet him, and which girl he would marry. These thoughts gave him strength. The decisive duel arrived. His opponent was a skilled warrior and wounded Bekbalat in the shoulder. But Bekbalat didn't stop. He kept fighting. When it seemed that his strength was about to give out, he remembered his mother's face, and it seemed as though she smiled at him. He gathered all his willpower and delivered a powerful blow with his sword, inflicting a mortal wound on the enemy. The battle was won. Bekbalat slowly recovered from his injury, and although his comrades in arms invited him to stay with them for a while, he immediately set off on the journey home. The road home was tough. His shoulder ached, and he had lost a lot of blood. But every evening, he imagined how his homeland would welcome him, how his mother would smile at him, how he would find the girl he loved, and what a beautiful home he would build. And so it happened. When he was approaching his village, his mother ran out to meet him, and with her came a very beautiful girl. "That's Julduz," thought Bekbalat. "How she has grown." Julduz was their neighbor. A month later, they had a wedding. A year later, the young couple moved into a new house that all the neighbors helped Bekbalat build, right next to his mother's house. And soon they had their firstborn son. A year later, they had a second son. Come visit Bekbalat, perhaps there's a third on the way. And he will tell you how important it is to believe in good things, how hard it is to reach them, but if you keep your dream in sight and move toward it step by step, then, well, you'll see for yourself. The job started must be completed. For a plan to be effective, that is, adapted to circumstances, the efforts of both intellect and instinct must be united in its development. Charles de Gaulle. Folk wisdom says, a person without a goal is like a ship without a rudder, sailing to a place unknown, for a purpose unknown. All world religions establish a clear path for their followers, where the true goal is achieved through the daily completion of many interconnected tasks. Islam recognizes the life goal of every Muslim as pleasing Allah and attaining paradise in the afterlife. To achieve these goals, a Muslim is set 5 obligatory tasks to be carried out throughout life: Shahada, testimony of faith; Zakat, religious tax to benefit the needy; Salat, 5 daily prayers; Psalm, fasting during the month of Ramadan; and Hajj, pilgrimage to Mecca and Medina. These tasks are interconnected and serve one goal, differing only in the form of execution. Unlike the Hajj, which allows for a one-time completion, the rest require regular performance throughout life. Through their regular observance, a Muslim's faith deepens and their understanding of truth grows. For example, the prayer dua, in which the believer supplicates to Allah, will differ between a neophyte and an elder who has known many religious mysteries. The neophyte's dua will resemble a child's prayer. The maturing of prayer occurs through the person's self-transformation, connected with mastering a new layer of reality, when the state and content of consciousness change, and a reassessment of surrounding reality takes place. Therefore, at different ages, a person prays differently, and their spiritual tasks become more complex and multifaceted. Islamic teaching implies the simultaneous observance of commandments because they are interconnected and complement each other. A person can mature in prayer only by acquiring new experiences that they bring into their prayer through fasting, testimony, almsgiving, and pilgrimage to holy places. The only way to survive is to constantly set new tasks for oneself. Harvey Cushing. Do what you can today, tomorrow, you can do even more. The foundational text of Christians, the Gospel, also encourages readers to continually conquer new spiritual heights and strive for perfection, which, as we know, has no limits. Since, according to Christianity, a person is a spiritually dynamic system, people must constantly set new goals and points of growth to prevent backsliding. Christianity directs individuals to diligent internal work, placing the task of inner transformation, saving the world by saving oneself, at the forefront through correcting flaws and combating passions. This struggle has its algorithms, rules, and logic. Though the 8 passions have different origins and effects, the first 6, gluttony, lust, avarice, anger, sorrow, and despondency, are interconnected in such a way that the excess of the first gives rise to the subsequent ones. Therefore, they must be fought in a similar manner. In battling them, one must always move from the preceding to the following. To conquer despondency, one must first suppress sorrow; to dispel sorrow, one must first suppress anger; to quench anger, one must trample avarice; to uproot avarice, one must subdue lust; and to suppress lust, one must restrain gluttony. The remaining 2 passions, vainglory and pride, are also interconnected like the previous ones, so that the strengthening of one gives rise to the other. However, they are entirely different from the first 6 and are not connected to them in a similar manner. They do not receive any cause for their birth from them but are even stimulated in an opposite way. For after the eradication of the first 6, these 2 thrive even more. Therefore, we are engaged in battle in a unique way. Yet, to eradicate pride, one must first suppress vainglory. Thus, by subduing the preceding ones, the subsequent ones will be pacified. Although the 8 mentioned passions are interconnected in this way, they are often divided into 4 alliances and combinations, as lust is especially united with gluttony, anger with avarice, despondency with sorrow, and pride is closely united with vainglory. 294. Thus, we must wage war against these passions in such a way that everyone, having discovered which passion especially harms them, directs their main struggle against it, using every effort and care to monitor and suppress it, directing the spears of daily fasts against it, throwing the arrows of heartfelt groans and sighs into it every moment, and continually shedding tears in prayer to God for the cessation of its torment. For no one can triumph over any passion until they are convinced that through their own diligence or effort, they cannot achieve victory over it, although it is also necessary for them to stay day and night in every labor and every care for that purpose. When such a warrior feels that they have been freed from their foremost passion, they must then again carefully examine the recesses of their heart to see which other passion is stronger compared to the others, and against it, especially, to mobilize all spiritual weapons. By conquering the foremost passions within themselves each time, they will sooner and more easily gain victory over the rest, the lesser ones. 295. Those with much work ahead do not look back. So, what is the solution to the problem? I repeat once again, it consists in finding a language in which the solution is obvious. Georgy Petrovich Chedrovitsky. I am convinced that the pursuit of perfection is what distinguishes a good life from a successful one. Meryl Streep. Buddhists, in their ascent to enlightenment, follow the Eightfold Path, a set of methods given by Buddha to end suffering. This path is often called the middle way, as it avoids extremes. The Eightfold Path consists of 3 stages: wisdom, morality, and concentration. The first includes 2 steps, and the remaining steps fall under the other 2 stages, making a total of 8 steps. This path is also called gradual, as development occurs smoothly along it. As Buddha explained, first, one must establish oneself in wholesome states, namely in the purification of moral discipline and right views. Then, when moral discipline is purified and views are straightened, one should practice the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Sutta Nipata 47.3. Believers always remember that after each step, the next, more difficult one will follow, and they think in advance about how to overcome the next height. Thus, having the right intention makes it easy to follow the right conduct to engage in right concentration. Therefore, all elements of the path are important and interconnected, each preceding the next step. 296. Difficult tasks are done immediately, the impossible takes a little longer. But on the path of spiritual perfection, it is difficult not to deviate from the highest goal and not lose the main bearings in the bustle of daily life. The fulfillment of small tasks and the ability to see them as steps towards God is the recipe for maintaining the fire of faith in the soul, according to Jewish preachers. The heart must, with the tongues of its flame, strive for divinity. Here, the main question is not even how to find your own light, but a more complex one: how to carry the fire of faith through life without losing it on life's sharp turns. Jews find the answer to this in the book of Proverbs, which presents the parables of King Solomon. Once, a respected townsman came to King Solomon, who was enjoying the sight of fish splashing in a pond, and said, "King, I am confused. Every day of my life is like the previous one, I cannot distinguish dawn from dusk, and I no longer know happiness." Solomon pondered and said, "Many would dream of being in your place, having your house, your gardens, and your wealth. But do you have any goal or cherished dream? What do you dream about in moments of rest and pleasure? Feel today like the person you want to become tomorrow. Alexander Sviash. The visitor answered him. At first, I dreamed of being freed from slavery. Then I dreamed that my trade would bring income. All this has long come true, so what should I dream of now? I think and I don't know. Then Solomon said, a person without a dream is like the fish swimming in this pond. Every day of their life is like the previous one, they do not distinguish dawn from dusk and do not know happiness. The king added, but unlike the fish, you have locked yourself in your own pond. If there is no good goal in your life, you will wander aimlessly through your house, and when you die, you will realize that you lived in vain. If you have a goal, every time you take a step, you will know whether it brought you closer to your goal or moved you further away, and this will fill you with excitement and passion for life. The petitioner furrowed his brow and said, does this mean that every time I reach one goal, I must find another, every time one of my dreams comes true, I must make another, and only in the search will I find happiness? And the king replied, yes. Happiness is in the search and attainment of the goal. 297. It is hard to find a person who doesn't set various tasks for themselves significant and intermediate, complex and simple, urgent and long-term. Often, difficulties await us on the path to achieving them. But by learning to overcome relatively small difficulties, viewing each difficulty as a fortress that needs to be stormed, we will cultivate in ourselves the best fighting qualities. Then each conquered fortress will give us new strength to achieve the next, more global and interesting goals. Humanity never sets tasks for itself that it is not ready to solve. Arkady and Boris Strugatsky.